from late 1900 to early 1941. Through consecutive victories, by the method of lightning war, and through the signing of the treaty with other countries, in the early stages of World War II, the Nazis conquered and controlled most of 6 European continents. At this time, Germany's military potential was mobilized to the maximum extent, and Nazi military planners all agree that this is the golden time to use blitzkrieg to attack the Soviet Union, to bring about a decisive victory and end the World War. With high confidence, June 2, 1941, Germany leads the Axis, launch an attack on the Soviet Union, with the code name Operation Barbarossa. This is considered one of the attacks, the largest and bloodiest in German history, with the ambition to devour the Soviet Union, when overwhelmingly superior in terms of initial numbers, weapons and command skills, was given the authority to establish the 3 core bureaus, including the Northern Army Group, Southern Army Group Headquarters, and the Central Army Group, with the common goal of prioritizing destruction, most of the enemy's strength, and become a summer nightmare for the Soviet Red Army, will eventually occupy Learning City, Kraft and capital Moscow. In the first hours of Operation Barbarossa, on the way to invade the Soviet Union, the German Army Group Center was surprised, decided to proceed one of the first attacks in the campaign, with the aim of encouraging the soldiers' morale, further cementing their confidence in the strategy, Flechwa, simultaneously to fire a provocative signal, show of force sent to the Soviet Red Army. With absolute confidence of victory, Brest Fortress attack, one of the important defense bases of the Soviet Union, was officially detonated by the Germans. Brest Fortress, built at the border gateway between the Soviet Union and Poland, Lon is on a large island, bounded by 2 branches of the Buk River and the Mukaves River. Take advantage of the island's terrain, the Tsarist engineers built a fortress bordering 2 rivers. Around the fortress are 2 layers of earthen ramparts, extremely solid. Outer layer about 6 m high, inner layer about 10 m high. Form 8 sharp corners protruding outward. The total length of the ramparts is up to 6.4 kilometers. In general, the fortress consists of 4 parts, includes a central area also known as the Citadel, along with 3 large gates. Erdponsky Gate on the west side, Press Gate in the north and Smart Gate in the south. Inside the fortress were built many arsenals, ammunition and food depots. Especially under the buildings inside the fortress is a system of 500 bulletproof bunkers. There are doors connecting one cellar to another. Since its inauguration in the summer of 1842, before World War I, Fortress Brest is considered one of the military bases, has very strong defensive features, with a solid rampart always protected by artillery. With a complex system of bulletproof bunkers, Brest Fort at that time always been considered an impregnable fortress. Soviet Red Army only need an army of average size, hold out in the fortress, still able to defeat, or heavy damage, an enemy army many times larger in number. In the World War II stage of the revolution, science and technology, the military field is developing rapidly, also the time when the Brest Fortress was lost very quickly. Your own attack properties, especially when military powers, presenting armies of up to millions of soldiers, with war equipment as tense as tanks, bombes. With the advent of massive artillery, fortresses have become somewhat obsolete. It becomes a narrow battlefield, associated with passive defense methods in place, and easily isolated by the opponent, vulnerable to large-scale destruction, vitality with modern firepower. However, the Soviet Union still considered the fortress Brest like mother's darling son, when emphasizing the solidity of the fortress, and try to upgrade it, to include in border defense plans, before World War II began. Sadly, investment plan for the darling of the Soviet Union, not yet implemented. Then the war was one step faster. Fort Brest enters World War II like a soldier who hasn't had time to put on his armor yet. So in the first hours of the campaign, the Nazis decided to use the tactic of make the most of the element of surprise. Absolute superiority in military force and weapons, artillery and air force to capture the fortress. With the ambition to make this area 7 capitals within 12 hours of the shooting. Germany's operational measures will be continuous artillery fire with dense density on the fortress, destroy defense systems, and disintegrated the morale of the Soviet garrison. Finally, infantry will be used to handle the rest. Even before the official assault on the fortress press, Germany also made a wise move. That is to send his secret police force, blend into the areas around the fortress, to cut off the main line of communication, and take over Soviet communication systems. This ensured that the Red Army officers inside the fortress will completely lose contact with the outside world, and is unlikely to receive further reinforcements. Mission to capture the Nazi press fortress. Assigned to the 4th Infantry Division, with about 17,000 soldiers, commanded by General First Sleeper. Coordinated with the 4th and 5th Infantry Divisions. There were also the BA-11 and Persian Infantry Divisions, with about 20,000 soldiers, and a tank regiment, belonging to the 2nd Tank Army, joined support, commanded by 2 generals Vanter Short and 2 Korean. Due to the secrecy, the attack lasted until the 89th minute. Soviet Red Army, there is no plan in the fortress, initial defense plan. Contrary to the number of armed troops up to teeth soaked in the smell of Nazi battlefields, the Red Army had a rather weak defense force. At the moment the Nazis opened fire in the area inside the press fortress, there are about 3,500 soldiers belonging to the 4th Infantry Regiment 4 and BA, command post and border guard station of the Border Guard Force. In addition to RA, there is also a medical unit and a company protecting the military medical area. The fortress is also home to students, military school, and 300 households of commanding officers and civilians serve in the military. Until after the war broke out, then a series of soldiers and people outside the fortress just pulled in to find shelter and fight, raised Soviet forces to about 8,000 men. So from before the battle broke out, total Soviet troops, there were only about 4,000 soldiers inside the fortress, less than the 17,000 soldiers of the original force, Nazi side. However, if you add the total number of combined units on the Nazi side, the difference will be much higher. The defense line in the fortress Brest becomes as fragile as, so partly because, although in theory, this is where the 6th Infantry Division is stationed, of the Soviet Red Army. However, at that time, for infantry regiments including artillery units, tanks of the 6th Division is participating in a drill, and could not withdraw in time before the Germans attacked and besieged the fortress. So at that time, Brest Fortress, almost no means of combat, other than personal weapons, because most of the old tanks and artillery were damaged, and is under repair. Heavy weapons are still usable. Then the 6th Division took them all to practice. And so at 3:15 on the morning of June 2, 1941, according to the Nazi battle plan, the attack on the fortress press officially began. In the first moments, the city of Brest and the fortress were tortured by the fierce German bombing raids. The rain of bombs, artillery barrage from across the border, continuously pouring down the entire Brest fortress, destroy all defensive strongholds, from the most primitive to the most solid. It is estimated that more than 4,000 artillery shells were fired by the Germans into the fortress and city press. According to the initial results, the German army was successful, destroyed most of the warehouses and water supplies inside the fortress. Simultaneously, German spy groups were also successful. Disruption of communications with the Soviet garrison. Go outside. But, even when German artillery bombarded the fortress, press with a storm of bullets and tear the whole area up, the Soviet Red Army soldiers were still bewildered. Not yet understood what happened. Even when top German troops disguised themselves in Soviet uniforms, captured traffic checkpoints, important outside the fortress, the Red Army still believes that our soldiers are attacking the wrong side. That's why, shortly after the attack broke out, set-piece lightning strikes by the German elite units. The Soviet garrison suffered heavy losses. Everything happened so fast. And with it the communication line was interrupted, making it impossible for commanding officers to grasp the situation, to give instructions to subordinate units, conduct defense, and make the army. The Soviet Union was divided into isolated pockets of resistance. At 3:45, German artillery stopped firing to make way for infantry. Storm the fortress. The resistance was fiercest in the gate area. Tereksponsky due to severe lack of combat weapons. The Soviet Red Army had no other choice. Must use close combat tactics. That is, hiding in the windows of the fortress, waiting for the top German soldiers to get close enough, then use everything you can to fight. Like a gun butt, wooden bayonet, or even use pans to fight one-on-one. One after that, reusing German weapons. To establish a small resistance cluster. Guard outside the fortress. By his persistent resistance, Red Army resistance clusters, the Soviet Union made the German army take a lot of time and vitality to cope. However, battle-hardened German soldiers finally succeeded in capturing the bridge in front of the Tereksponsky Gate, the road used to raid and capture the fortress. Everything seemed simpler. After successfully eliminating the external resistance clusters, the Nazis faced an even bigger problem. That is when going deep into the inner part of the fortress. Systematic resistance clusters, under the command of Soviet officers, was established in time. The resistance clusters now had larger numbers, better armed, and well organized. Not spontaneous like the outside, making it very difficult for the Germans to attack, despite holding the force in hand with superior firepower. At 1300 hours the same day, Soviet garrison forces went into counteroffensive mode. Drive the Germans from the bridgeheads, intersections of traffic routes, to seize weapons and ammunition, and then retreated back inside the fortress. So despite launching many attacks, use all the most powerful weapons from heavy artillery, rocket artillery to flamethrowers, Germany still cannot expect fighting power and resistance of the Soviet army and people. Much more durable than expected. Some German soldiers disguised themselves as Soviet officers, with the aim of disrupting the system. Commander inside the fortress also could not help Germany win this area. On the first day, planned to make the Fort Brest be 7 defenders, within 12 hours of Germany, was completely bankrupt. Although successfully protecting the deputy station on the first day, the Soviet Union also suffered extremely heavy losses. Step into June 2nd. Only in the barracks area is one of the most fiercely fought, with terrible casualties. There were only about 18 Soviet soldiers left, capable of fighting. However, people live in the fortress, still unanimously support the Red Army with all our might. They participated in treating wounded soldiers, ammunition and food collection. Weapons from military depots was almost completely destroyed by the Germans. Even healthy young people volunteered together, take up arms to fight with the Red Army, and form mixed soldier tops. So, perceived use of flashy warfare to quickly take down the Brest fortress in a few hours, as expected, is too difficult. Germany decided to switch to a siege strategy, long-lasting fortress. Evening of June 24th. German 4th and 5th Divisions used elite commandos, suddenly raided and captured the Tereksponsky Gate. Concentrate the remaining defense forces of the Soviet Army towards Copran Gate. Soviet soldiers from other gates took advantage. Night use. Passed through each wall into the fortress to join the defense group at Copran Gate. To coordinate actions effectively. On the night of June 24th, at the Provisional Defense Headquarters, located in the basement of the 4th Regiment's barracks, the provisional commander drafted and published the Command No. 1 to organize forces into platoons and assign defensive positions. The war continued to rage. Within 2 days, until June 26th, country by overwhelming military power has partially mastered the Brest fortress. But the remaining Red Army forces in the fortress still able to fight together, under the command of Captain Ivan Chubakov and Commissar Zefin Feyman. Also that night, Soviet garrison and Fortress Brest have continued to try repel German attacks. But unfortunately it was not successful, and suffered heavy losses. June 27th, 1 week after the first attack. Due to being too tired, having to attack each point of fire, hunt down and kill every single Red Army soldier, better to die by mistake than to miss out, the Nazis decided to mobilize heavy artillery fire, attack each house, which they suspected had Soviet troops inside. Even German commanding officers believed that the fastest and most leisurely way is to use very strong firepower to level the entire press area. Then the Germans would easily capture it, rather than having to struggle to attack each house one by one. To perform, the Germans began to use large caliber guns. Fires extremely heavy bullets up to 1.25 t, along with two 600mm cannons, specialized for breaking concrete, bullet weight up to 2 tons. The destructive power of these guns has become a nightmare terror for the Red Army, Soviet Union on the battlefield, as they create giant bullet craters, up to 30 m wide with fatal injuries, even when not directly attacked by them. Because even though the Red Army soldiers were hiding deep inside the fortress, but under the pressure of continuous explosions caused by German artillery, there were many soldiers with ruptured lungs. In the post-battle report, General Footslipper, the commander of the German 4th and 5th Infantry Divisions, wrote, "From the bottom floor of the Cho building to the windows that exploded when the KIP detonator was activated. When the building exploded, we could hear screams and moans." Soviet soldier Rust, right, as these soldiers continued to fight to the end. With such destructive power, with just a few shots, the Germans razed the entire fortress area and destroyed most of the Soviet Red Army's strength, set the stage for Germany to launch its final attack plan, to take complete control of the Brest fortress. On June 29th and 30th, 1941, the Nazi army launched attacks on a large scale, break through the Soviet Red Army's defense lines. On June 30th, the German Air Force dropped two TSA heavy bombs, completely destroyed the eastern part of the fortress, with the explosion shaking the nearby city of Brest. Brest Fortress Real Hand. Both members of the Provisional Command, including Captain Chubachat and Famine Political Commissar, were all captured alive. These two Soviet officers later all received sad endings. Captain Chubachat was thrown into a concentration camp, reserved to kill Soviet prisoners of war, according to the Nazi policy of genocide. And Famine Political Commissar was immediately executed at the gate of the city, because he is Jewish. So after 9 days of fierce fighting, the Germans captured the entire upper part of the fortress. This means strategic goals, capture of the German Brest fort, basically completed. However, they spent too much time, compared to the original estimate, is to capture this area within 12 hours. The human cost is quite high. German casualty estimates. At the Battle of Fort Brest there were about 8,900 soldiers, as of June 30th. July 2, 1941 main force of the 4th Infantry Division. 5 Germany has left the battlefield. A number of German troops remain behind, continue to occupy the fortress. But the battle at Fort Brest in reality not yet ended on June 30th. Although at that time the surface of the fortress was occupied by the Germans, hidden deep in the fortress's underground tunnel system, there are still Red Army soldiers alive. And they continue their constant, protracted fight. In the next few weeks, 3 days after the Germans captured Fort Brest, one of the Soviet officers, surviving defense commander, it was Major Pyotr Gavrilov, who slipped through the different compartments and gathered 12 soldiers remaining in the battlefield. G.A. Freelove commanded a squad of 12 men, hiding in the underground bunker, and used surprise attack tactics to significantly deplete the German occupation forces. From late June to near the end of July, Gunfire still echoes for the bunkers, and the buildings were blown to pieces. However, in nearly a month of fighting, each soldier in the major's squad in turn gave love both sacrifice one by one. Because of the very experienced combat capabilities of the teams, German commandos occupy the fortress, and also because of lack of food and water. Be the last man standing. In a state of hunger and severe injury, Major Love tried to eat the whole mixed meal for cattle to try to survive, until 2 July 1941. In a state of skin and bones, injuries and food poisoning, Major Gavilop still fought back fiercely for 1 hour, with pistols and grenades, killing several German soldiers, before he was captured alive. According to Nazi reports, Soviet Red Army resistance nests just completely destroyed when the two leaders Hitler and Mussolini, former Italian Prime Minister, visit the Brest fortress, under the strict guard and protection of German soldiers. To eliminate all pockets of resistance, remnants of the Red Army, Supreme Commander of the Nazi Army, ordered the discharge of floodwaters to drown Soviet soldiers still fighting in the fortress's underground bunkers, until July 2, 1941. More than a month after the battle was ignited, a Red Army unit stationed in the remote rear areas of the Soviet Union, the Soviets received the last telegram, was broadcast unencrypted from Fort Brest with the content: critical situation of the fortress about to fall to 7. We will destroy the animals. We will detonate mines to kill them. Follow us. From here, the Battle of the Fortress Press, one of the opening battles of the campaign, the terrible Barbarossa of Nazi Germany, and also the opening battle of the Soviet Union's Great Patriotic War, has officially closed. If you find this video helpful, please share and give it a like. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our bear videos.